And we're live. Hello, everyone. I'm Sasank, and this is Vikas. Welcome to Last Minute FPL, the only video you'll need for all your FPL info, especially if you're after quick and reliable last minute FPL details and some advice. Good evening, Vikas.
Yeah, hey Shashank, and thanks so much for tuning in. In this podcast, hopefully, we'll provide you some last minute guidance and tips and data which you can use to inform and make your own decisions as we are approaching the first game week of this season.
Cool. Let's get started. We'll start off with a quick introduction of ourselves. Uh, so, I'll go first. So, my name is Shashank, and I've been playing FPL casually from 2007, but seriously in the last 7 years, I'd say, when I discovered the Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube world. I've gotten really obsessed with FPL over the years, and I've finished in the top 100k since then, with two top 10k finishes. I typically use a lot of data to make my decisions. I look at models and projections and rely on stats. And I'm also a safe manager, so I prefer long term planning and taking less hits. Why don't you go, Vikas?
Yeah, I've been playing for 8 years, pretty obsessively again, last 8 years, and I tend to chase a lot of bandwagons in the sense that I don't really I take a lot of risks generally, and some of those risks come from the fact that I make some early transfers looking for that 0.1 savings. So yeah, like typically my team ends up having a high team value, and sometimes that doesn't correlate to points always.
Cool. Why don't we jump in then? So Vikas has created a custom fixture difficulty system that allows you to identify which teams have good fixtures, which teams have bad fixtures, and also which are the good and bad teams. So why don't you explain what we're looking at?
Yeah. So since this is the first week, the data that we're using here to project the fixtures is just based on performance from the last season. And what you're seeing on screen here, especially the second and third columns, is the best fixtures for attackers, and the third column, the best fixtures for defenders. Or in other words, the second column kind of tells you which teams you want to select for your attackers in your team, and the third column tells you which teams you want to select for your defenders. And kind of like what stands out here is Fulham, Crystal Palace, Liverpool, Everton have really good fixtures for attack, and what you also want to keep in mind here is sometimes even though the fixtures are really good, the attack themselves for the team might not be as strong. So what we've also color coded here is green indicating that the team itself has a strong attack, and yellow indicating that the team has a good enough attack but not as strong as the ones in green. So what you want to really take away from this slide is the green colored teams are the ones that you really want to focus on because they have a really good attack and really good fixtures in the second column, and a really good defense and really good fixtures for defense in the third column. So definitely teams looking at this, teams that I do want to target are Liverpool and Newcastle, maybe Crystal Palace as well for attack, and Liverpool, Fulham, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Palace for defense.
Yeah, I think this is a really helpful view. I think especially for me in the last 2 or 3 years, I've not looked at fixtures so much. Like I've just been trying to look at projected points from my model and making decisions based on that. But I think when I looked at this view first, I realized that I need to have more players from Liverpool, and started looking at my team because my first draft didn't have any Liverpool players. And the best thing about this is entirely data driven. So it wipes out the biases we have, such as like United being a good team or like it identifies teams like Palace and Fulham who had really strong finishes to last season, and I think that gets reflected here.
Yeah, and fixtures is again just one aspect into decision making. I think, like for example, even though Liverpool have really good fixtures, there might be players that you don't want to select from Liverpool because they don't have guaranteed minutes, or that there are other risks involved. So I think there's just one lens to look at it, but it's if there are nailed players that we'll get onto later on, then these are the teams to look at for sure from a fixture perspective.
So yeah, let's look at the other side of the coin. These are the teams with the easy fixtures, but if we go into the teams that have difficult fixtures, do you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, so this is just, as Shashank explained, the inverse. Again, in the opposite way, we even if some teams like Chelsea have tough fixtures to start with for their attackers. So what this indicates is that in the first 5 fixtures, they're playing some teams with pretty good defense. But Chelsea themselves had a pretty good attack, at least based on last year. Of course, like now they've had a manager change. There are different circumstances, but this is again just purely looking at fixtures based on data from 23-24 season. You do still want to consider some of these teams that had a strong attack, even though they have tougher fixtures. Like, for example, Chelsea, Arsenal, Man City. These attackers can still do well. And similarly, Arsenal and Man City, they were just so far ahead in terms of defense compared to the rest of the teams that even though they do have tougher fixtures, they're teams that you'd still want to consider because of the strength of the team itself.
Yeah, and especially teams like Arsenal and City, they're almost fixture proof. So it makes sense that even if their fixtures are hard, you still want to own those players. I think last year, both of them averaged an XG conceded of less than 1, which tells you that clean sheets are very likely. And same thing in attack, with both teams challenging for the league. You probably would consider people like Haaland or Saka as attackers who could do well against any team.
Yeah, and one more team to call out here is Everton. They did have really good defensive stats, which is expected, I guess, of a Sean Dyche team. They're another team to consider as well, even though they do not have the easiest of fixtures for their attackers.
That makes sense.
Or defenders, yeah.
One thing that we want to do on this podcast is, since we're making decisions completely on the basis of data, especially we want to show you things like fixtures and points projections based on historical data. We wanted to go over this AI model that I built. So over the last 5 years, me being a little too obsessed with data, I actually built a ML model that projects player points. And in fact, this team has done fairly decently over the last 2 or 3 seasons, finishing 26K last year. So we'll be walking you through the projections of what this AI model has given when we go into each the players to consider in each position. But the way this works essentially is it looks at the previous 4 game weeks to identify a player's form, and it also looks at the previous 19 game weeks before that to identify the player's class, because you don't want to make decisions entirely based on the recent data. And what it does is it predicts that player's points for the next 4 game weeks. So I've just put together a list of features that the model uses. So like, for example, if you look at goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and forwards, they all have different features that have the highest correlation to points. And I've divided these into player stats, team stats, and opponent stats. And if you want to know more about this model, you can read the write-up that I wrote about it on the link that you see on screen. But I think the main takeaway from this is just to get an understanding of what stats have most indication of player points. So if you look at defense, for example, you will see that the long-term statistics of the opponent like how many clean sheets they get, what their XG and XGC is more significant when you compare to let's say goalkeepers, where there are no player stats at all that are correlated. It's just the team and the opponent. So yeah, having said that, we can go into our position-wise discussion. Let's start with the forwards. Vikas, do you want to go first?
Yeah. On the left-hand side in the table, you do see what the AI is projecting in terms of forwards. Interestingly, it projects Havertz pretty highly, who also features in my list as an avoid. I think a part of that, I think curious to understand how the model works here, but one of the reasons I have Havertz in the avoid section is just more on the fact that from what I've noticed of Havertz and Arsenal, Chelsea, Leverkusen, it starts pretty slow and then he accelerates a lot towards the end of the season. So that's why I kind of put him in the avoid along with Jackson and Darwin. Jackson and Darwin pretty much because I'm not sure whether they'd start. Jackson should, but Chelsea seem like they're in the market for another striker. And Darwin is competing with Jota, Gakpo. So these are the strikers I'd avoid. Must-own.
And just on the same point, I just want to explain what the projections, what goes into the projections that makes Havertz so highly rated. He had a very strong finish to the season. So both his previous 4 game weeks and previous 19 game week statistics are really high, both in XG, XA, as well as the points that he scored. I think the model is severely underrating Haaland, purely because of some patchy form he had in the second half of last season, where it was almost okay to not own him and go with someone like a Watkins, which is why I personally feel that Haaland is a must-own, even though the model is saying otherwise. And the other thing to keep in mind when looking at these projections is game time. So you have to understand that the X minutes of the player will have a big say in what they actually score. So we should pick the players who you think will play at least 60 minutes or more, because the model assumes that they're going to play the same X minutes that they've been playing in the previous 19 weeks.
That makes sense. I see both of us have Isaac and Haaland as players to target to start the season. I suspect that maybe you can add your reasoning, but I suspect that's mainly they're just talismanic figures for their teams. Both teams really strong attack and good fixtures to start with.
Yeah, I think with Isak, I think he's a no-brainer. And the reason is that he's looked really good in preseason. Newcastle have strong fixtures. They don't have Champions League football to distract them. And I think the thing with Haaland, even though he's priced at 15 million, currently I feel like he's still someone who can be a game breaker. Like if he gets a hat-trick or a brace in the first couple of weeks, it can leave you really lagging behind. And I think the other alternative to him, if you don't own and distribute the funds in the rest of your team, will be like premiums in midfield. So I do understand a structure that doesn't include Haaland. You can still go there, but personally, I would not take that chance.
Agreed. Yeah, I think there are, of course, like other good strikers and strikers that again have some pretty good fixtures, had strong into the strong 23-24 season, like Watkins, Solanke, Mateta. So put them in strikers to strongly consider. Of course, there's a bit of a risk with Watkins because he's not played preseason. I think if he definitely was going to start game week 1, he's someone I would probably bump up even one level higher here.
Yeah, I think so. I didn't include Watkins because of game time, and also his price is at that awkward 9 million mark, which I think makes sense if you're going without a Haaland or if you're spreading your money around. And I think with Mateta, it's mainly the X minutes. He's had a good preseason because he was at the Olympics, but I don't think he will be starting for game week 1, which is why I've put him in avoid. It's more of a decision for future game weeks. And like if you can see in the model, he's rated very highly as well. He's 4th on the list, but it's purely an X minutes thing.
Makes sense. Wood and Muniz, they're very interesting options. Both of them are, especially with the pricing this year, with how expensive some players are. Wood and Muniz both have really good fixtures to start with, and are not very expensive to own. 6 million, I guess, each. Um, but there is a bit of a risk in terms of X minutes for Wood with Awonyi, and still not clear how Fulham are going to do from an attacking perspective, although they do have a good team with Smith Rowe coming in as well.
Yeah, I think for me, Wood is just a very boring pick. Like, I just don't like such players being in my FPL team because you're, like, yes, he's gotten hat tricks before, but you're almost relying on, that old school way of playing. Like, I just want attackers from better teams. And having said that, I'm strongly considering Joao Pedro. Brighton just activated the release clause of Rutter from Leeds. So his game time is under question, but I think the first 2 or 3 game weeks he should still start. And at 5.5, he enables a lot of other things in the rest of my team. Yeah, I think we.
And it doesn't hurt that he's on pens.
Yeah, I mean, as long as he needs to be on the pitch for that. But yeah, currently he is in my team. I would love to own Solanke. Like he got 175 points last year, and he's moving to Spurs. He'll probably lose penalties to Son, but at 7.5 he could be a steal. Like imagine in an Ange team having a striker at 7.5 million. It could be a really good player to own.
Yeah, great. So you want to move on to the midfielders?
Yeah, I think so. For me, when it comes to the midfield, this is where we have a lot of options, and most of the teams have like Haaland and Isak in attack. They have like some premiums in defense, but this is what is basically going to decide the structure of your team. The way I'm looking at it, Saka and Eze are must-owns for me. Saka because he's still so young and he's already such an established Premier League player. I think he's only going to improve. And Arsenal are genuine title challengers. They've proved that over the last 2 seasons. So at 10 million, I definitely want to own him. And with Eze, I feel he's maybe 500,000 underpriced. He's 7 million. Like Mateta is 7.5, for example. And he had a great second half of the season as well. Of course, there are rumors of him moving to Man City, and that's something to keep an eye on. But at this price, like he was the first name on my team sheet when the game launched.
Yeah, I think they're really strong picks. For me, as players that I definitely want to own, again following on from just looking at fixtures because I feel like that's the best projection without any data beforehand, along with the fact that both Salah and Gordon are nailed. I think these are two players that I definitely would like to own. Of course, whether I'm actually going to own them is going to vary because some of that also depends on kind of pricing and how to fit in everyone else that I want. But I would love to own Salah and Gordon. Eze, Saka, and Kunku, Son, they're all also really great options. And Kunku, I think, is the biggest risk in this bucket because one, we have no idea how he's going to operate in the Maresca system. He's also a little bit injury prone. Not sure whether he's going to play 10, number 8. Maresca said he sees him as a versatile player. Not really sure what that means in terms of FPL. So I think at 6.5, he still seems like a great pick because he also had a good preseason.
Yeah, and that's primarily why he's in my team. He could be one of those players who seems like he was stupidly priced later in the season. I mean, Palmer was just 5 million last year, but Nkunku at 6.5, he's done really well in other leagues. And he looks like he's going to start the season. Of course, Chelsea have only the 120 players, so you don't know who's going to start where. But I think it's a risk that you can take. And if it doesn't work, you can easily move him on to someone in the same price bracket.
Yeah, I think I have kind of similar thoughts there. Differential wise, there are a lot of players that are extremely tempting in the bucket of, I really want them, but I'm also not sure. and that's who I would kind of classify as differential players. Like for example, Hudson-Odoi, Smith Rowe, Bailey. They all have really great fixtures. They're not very expensive. They can act as enablers, and it feels like they can also like really tick off and get some big points. And I'd include Jota and Diaz as well in this list. There is always a risk of rotation, X minutes, and how they're all going to kind of fit into the systems that they're playing in their own respective teams. But I really like these set of players, and I think we have a good spread this year of players in the 5.5, 6.5, 7.5 bucket, and again, like a really good kudos to the FPL team to get the pricing really spot on this year.
Yeah, fully agree with you on the pricing. They've basically ensured that there's this decent gap between the premiums and the mid-price options, which allows you to, and that ensures that you actually have to look at players in the 5.5, 6.5 midfield and forward range. The only 5.5 I am considering though is Smith Rowe, because I think he's a quality player. He's better than his price, and Fulham is a really attacking team with great fixtures. I've included Bruno in differentials. He's very highly rated in most models, so I don't know if he's actually a differential, but I'm a little hesitant to go with him. Being a United fan, I don't want the double depression of both United and Bruno not doing well. But if I can, have that extra million or two above, say, a Jota or a Gordon, he's someone I definitely want in my team. With Jota, if he's playing, he's a great pick, because I think at 7.5 he can do the same thing that Salah is doing. The only question is, do you want to be worried checking the lineups every week? Because there's Darwin, there's Gakpo, there's Diaz, and even if Jota does start, he could come off in 65-70 minutes. Slot is still probably figuring out what his best team is. So that's the only reason I'm a bit hesitant. But great upside pick. Again, someone you can hop off if it doesn't go well.
Yeah, did you see that goal that Jota scored in the preseason with kind of like that Van Persie type finish? He's such a classy player who gets so many points. The problem is, as you said, a lot of competition, not sure about Slot's system, and he's also a bit injury prone. But I really love owning Jota. I think he got me a lot of points last season as well, whenever I had him.
Yeah, I think great memories owning him for most FPL managers, because whenever people jumped on him, he always seems to do well. But looking at some of the players we've listed as avoids, so Diaz is the first one I've listed. Similar reasons as Jota, and I think he's even more of a risk than Jota. Jota is playing striker, so if you're going for one of them, might as well go with Jota. Palmer is someone I've hesitantly put in avoid purely because of the price. If you're trying to find a balanced team, then it'll be difficult to include him in your squad. Also, he had a lot of penalties last year, so he could see the kind of regression that Bruno saw after his first 1.5 seasons or so. So he's a wait and watch for me. What about the avoids that you've listed out?
Yeah, I've got Bowen and generally West Ham in the avoid section, because I do think they're all really good players, and some of these players I'd love to hop on a bit later, but given their slightly more difficult start, I think I just generally avoid West Ham players in general. Rodgers, I think he's done really well in preseason, but I feel like he could be one of those traps where he doesn't start or he doesn't perform as well when the season actually starts. And with Watkins coming back, I'm not sure how it's going to affect his minutes as well.
Yeah, and just taking a look at the AI projections, I think it's most of the usual suspects that you see here. Diaz is, of course, rated highly, but X-Mens could be a problem. But otherwise, it's Saka, Palmer, Salah, Bruno, KDB, Eze, Son. So it's and even Gordon is highly rated. Maybe someone to keep an eye on here is Odegaard. Like he could also be someone, if I don't like the word coverage, but if you want an Arsenal player and you don't want to have Salah, there are a lot of mid-priced, when I say mid-priced, 7 to 9 million range, who could basically match the premiums.
I feel like Odegaard sometimes flies under the radar. I think he got like 170, 180 points last season, and it kind of always sticks over. It gets those assists. So yeah, I may not match the explosiveness as Saka, but at 8.5 seems like a strong option.
Why don't we move on to the defenders? Um, yeah, so for me, Barco is a must-own. Uh, I think he's probably even ahead of Trent for me. He, I mean, he could lose a spot, but a 4.0 million starting defender for Brighton is a great bench option, especially this year when we're having to make sacrifices all over the pitch. It's a great substitute who can come in if you have some risky picks in your starting lineup, like Jota or Kwanzaa, who you don't know whether they'll start or not. Someone like Barco could easily come in. Trent is the other one who is a must-own in my team at least. Like I'd understand if that's the sacrifice you have to make, because it's like we have to pick and choose this season. You can't own big hitters everywhere. But for me, Trent is another player who's one of the first names on my team sheet. We all know what he can do, and this is the lowest he's been priced for several seasons. And the same Jota goal that you spoke of, it was a great ball from Trent again, and he's good attack and defense coverage for Liverpool. I'm hoping that in Sloth's system, where they control more of the ball, they keep more possession, they could see a shift towards the Arsenal and City type of defense, where they keep more clean sheets, compared to like the gung-ho football that Klopp had.
Yeah, agreed. I guess like the only thing that maybe worrying a bit about Trent, I also have him as my must-own, is he does also come inside a bit more, at least from what I saw a little bit. I haven't seen as much, but from whatever I've seen, it comes inside a bit more. I don't know whether that's going to impact his points potential in terms of attacking returns. But Trent has such quality that as in the goal that you spoke about, he can get points from anywhere, and with a strong fixtures, agree that he's definitely someone I want to own for sure.
And I see you've listed a lot of strongly considered players. Like for me, I feel like Gabriel is someone who could be even better than he was. He's consistently gets so much more XG than any other defender in the game. And Arsenal, again, I'm really obsessed with Arsenal's defense. Like if I could, I would own double Arsenal defense. But at 6 million, again, I think they can easily keep 19-20 clean sheets. What's been happening in the recent seasons of the Premier League is we're seeing lesser clean sheets, but that's mainly because the smaller teams are not doing well at all. Teams like City and Arsenal are actually keeping more clean sheets than they used to a few years ago. So I think he's a great way to get into that Arsenal defense.
Yeah, agree. I think Arsenal's defense it feels very reliable. That it almost kind of like what you said, fixture proof. In my list, we also have like really great options in the budget defense, especially to enable kind of like the more expensive attack. Mikolenko, Anderson, Konsa, Robinson, they all are pretty much guaranteed X minutes. Really pretty decent defense with really good fixtures. So these are players that I feel can easily round out the defense along with Barco, depending on kind of how many premiums that you want to go with.
Yeah, I agree with you on the on Konza especially. Like it allows you to have a more balanced team, which is why like it'll be tough to own, say, Trent, Gabriel, and Guardiola without going with 2 or 3 budget players in attack. Like I've been trying that for the past couple of days. But I think Guardiola can be a wait and watch. City also have a lot of players coming back from preseason. They'll also probably take some time to figure out their starting lineup. He's someone I'm trying to look for maybe in game week 4 or 5 when everything is settled down after that first international break.
Yeah, I would love to own Hall and Livramento, like if they start. Both really quality players attacking, and I think Newcastle will be better in defense with Pope coming back as well. But it's just a question of are they going to start. But if there is an indication that one of them are kind of holding down a spot, I would definitely look to go there at some point in the season.
Yeah, Hall is definitely very exciting. 4.5 million defender from Newcastle, who is also attacking, can be a gift. But yeah, I think it's a wait and watch for me because maybe you'll have two 4.5s, and I feel someone like Konza is more reliable. Villa has had a good defense. And I think to start the season off, you'll probably play one of your 4.5s, depending on your team structure. And I think so. I've identified Kwanzaa as the other differential for me, and Munoz. Munoz I know is 5 million, but he's very attacking. And like you mentioned, Palace's defense has been really good for almost the entire of last season, but especially in the second half. And like he could, if you have that 0.5 to spare, he could be a good differential. Kwanzaa is someone who, in the first 3 or 4 game weeks, I think he should start. Again, a low risk, a high reward pick, because if he nails down a spot in that Liverpool defense, it could allow you to make upgrades in other positions. And in game week 1, you have that security of someone else being on defense, someone else being on the bench, like Barco or your other 4.5s. So I personally feel like if you have an extra spot in defense from Liverpool, like unless you want to go double attack and Trent, Kwanzaa is a great option to start with.
Agree. The players that I don't have and I'm not looking at right now are Trippier and James, for obvious reasons, because he's suspended. Trippier seems like he might have a move away from Newcastle. But even so, like even if he stays, I think this season he might start getting rotated, just purely given his age and the number of fixtures, that he's not someone that I would gravitate towards in the premium bracket.
Yeah, and I think in his price range, we have a lot of premium options who I think are significantly better at this stage, and also Newcastle itself has better budget options. So I think Trippier is a no-go. So I've included two, I would say, controversial avoids, because both are actually good options. Saliba I've included because maybe he's slightly more nailed than Gabriel, but I think in current state, Gabriel should be starting. He did start 34 games last season, even though he was dropped in the first few games. It's definitely something to keep an eye on, but Gabriel typically has 3 or 4 times more XG than Saliba. So he's usually my Preference. With Porro, I just don't trust the Spurs defense at all. He's very highly owned and very... I think he's highly rated by a lot of models too. And I think the first 2 fixtures, it's okay to have him. But I think like you'll probably be able to own 2 premium defenders, and my preference is Trent and Gabriel. I think that's the main reason. I think Spurs can easily concede against any team, like even Leicester, like the gung-ho football that they play. And now we also have these new rules where defenders who concede goals will lose bonus, and the player that would have lost most points from last season to this is Porro. He would have lost 10 points across the entire season, which is not much, but it can be frustrating for a player who typically gets an assist in a 2-1 win, or gets a goal in a 3-2 win. You'll probably end up with 7 points when he scores a goal, or 4 points when he gets an assist. And I think the ceiling is higher for someone like a Trent or a Gabriel.
Yeah, I agree. With Spurs, I'm definitely more excited about the attack than the defense. So Porro is also not someone I'm looking at as well. But Saliba, yeah, he's someone that I think I slightly disagree, mainly because even if the data is not as strong, he does seem to come away with some of those headed goals every so often, and that slightly higher X minutes.
And both of them scored in the last preseason game, both Gabriel and Saliba. So I was looking at the...
I think you can't go wrong really between the two.
Yeah. And I think in the model projections as well, it's pretty much the big hitters from the big teams, like City defenders, Arsenal defenders, and Liverpool defenders. But if you look further down the list, I think it also ties in with what you were showing in the fixture difficulty. You do see those Palace defenders, Munoz and Mitchell, and Fulham as well, with Robinson. I think Robinson is a great option, like you mentioned, and the model seems to agree with that. Cool, let's go to the most exciting position. So yeah,
I like the must own there.
yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, for me, goalkeeper is just pick someone and pray. So
Yeah.
I typically want to go as cheap as possible, unless there's a game breaking option who's slightly underpriced. So the only must own for me is a 4.0 bench keeper. I mean, don't put too much thought into it. I know that people typically go for the lower owned 4.0 to avoid a price drop, but it inevitably happens anyway. Just pick a 4.0 and go with it. In strongly consider, I've included two 4.5 keepers who I think have good fixtures and good defenses, Henderson and Sells. I was also flirting with Flecken, but he has a tricky set of first 4 or 5 fixtures. And if you're anyway going to do an early wildcard, which could happen, might as well go with someone who has better fixtures to start off with.
Yeah, especially I think recently there was some news about Henderson being given the number 1, and that kind of cleared a lot of the confusion around the Palace goalkeeping conundrum. And with that, I think Henderson, someone definitely to strongly consider. Also have Pope and Pickford because they're 5 million, 0.5 more, but they have that they feel a bit more kind of providing me, at least if I own them, a peace of mind in the sense that I can own them for a longer period of time, and they might be giving me like more clean sheets than what I can expect of a Henderson or Sells. But I think I agree with you that for with the amount of money to outlay in the rest of the team, a 4.5 keeper with Henderson or Sells seems like a good way to start with.
Yeah, and I think so. I've put both of them in avoid because I just don't like spending that extra 0.5 on a keeper, because inevitably the one that I pick is going to concede a lot of goals. And I think it's a trap to feel like Pickford or Pope are more reliable than the 4.5s. Because firstly, the lower teams the keepers do get a lot of save points, especially Sells. They have good defenses and they get a lot of save points, which is the perfect combination that you want, because they'll likely get more bonus as well. With Pope, there is that hope that Newcastle can go back to being that defense that they were a couple of seasons ago, where they kept churning out clean sheet after clean sheet. But given the state of my squad, I'm scrambling for every 0.5. I just want to spend as little as possible on this position. And if you look at the projections on the side as well, there's not much in it. The highest keeper is projected to get like 14 points, and like Pickford all the way down in 8th or 9th is projected to get 13 points. So typically the keepers don't vary too much, except in hindsight. So I think that I would just go with the cheapest keeper that you can find.
Agree.
Yeah, but the differential that I mentioned is Raya. Again, like a lot of trust in Arsenal's defense. So if you have a structure where you can somehow get that money in play, it could be a set and forget option where you just keep them irrespective of what the fixtures are.
Yeah, I have them. I have Raya, Edison, Allison all in avoid, and my only reason there is even though they might be good options, they're just really boring picks from teams where you might want to own 3 other players. So I think the ceiling for these keepers are, as you said, very low, and the ceiling for players from these teams can be very high from elsewhere on the pitch.
Fully agree with you there, which is why Raya's not going to be in my team. But can you comment on Sanchez? I see you put him as differential, and like would love to know your thoughts as a Chelsea fan. Is he likely to start?
I don't know. Like, I think if Sanchez nails down a spot, or Jorgensen, like one of those two, and with Maresca kind of honing down his system over time, I think at 5 million they could be strong differentials, but not to start the season with. I think it's kind of like a wait and see for 3-4 weeks before jumping on there. With Leicester, Maresca had a heavy possession system where Leicester really hogged the ball, and it's kind of like you keep the ball so much that the number of goals that you're going to concede probably is going to come down. And Chelsea conceded a lot of goals last year. So I think if that system takes hold, then then I think Chelsea's defense can be much stronger than last season, just purely from the fact that they're going to keep the ball a lot more compared to previous season. But beginning of the season, Chelsea, I think is going to be chaotic, and they're going to concede a lot until they learn the system.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because a lot of the big teams that are keeping clean sheets are going that route. Like whether it's Liverpool, and maybe not Liverpool, but City or Arsenal in the last few years, the reason for their excellent defenses is typically because they have almost 60-70% possession, which makes it very unlikely for other teams to even create chances. But yeah, I think wait and watch there also. Whoever turns out to be the Chelsea number one keeper could be underpriced once the team gets settled.
Mhm.
Cool. Yeah, and in terms of projections as well, looks like the model really likes Cells, almost rating him on par with the other premium assets. And it also likes Pope and Leno, but like I said, there's not much in between the keepers anyway. So let's look at how our game week 1 drafts look.
Yeah. So I've gone with a slightly bigger in the back type of system. I've got Saliba, Guardiola, Trent, Arsenal, Liverpool, City, kind of covering defense from all three of the teams that expect to keep a lot of clean sheets. Henderson in goal, just a 4.5 keeper really, and I think Henderson seems the best of the lot. Could be Flecken as well. I don't have Salah, so I'm just going with the Haaland draft, and I'm really hoping that Jota can, I can't say cover, but Jota can at least get a few points in terms of the Liverpool attack. From what I expect, that Liverpool will score a lot of goals with these initial set of fixtures, and I'm hoping Jota can, at least for the first few weeks, join in the party there. Got Isaac and Gordon. Newcastle have really strong fixtures. Gordon, I'm not sure. He did play the last preseason game. He scored as well. I hope he would start, but if there's an indication that he's not going to start, he might change. Got Nkunku and Eze as well, and Mateta up front. Mateta, I think he will start the first game. He's one of the players who I expect to actually be match fit because he's been playing a professional tournament in the Olympics, even though that's under 21. Scored like 5-6 goals there, and then before the Olympics, 13 out of 13 goals in 13 games under Glasner. So I really like Mateta, and really from the aspect that he's explosive, like he's got hat tricks and seemed really on it, which he's taken forward in the Olympics. I'm really hoping he has a strong start this season.
Yeah, I think first comments on seeing your team, it looks very balanced. I think not going with Salah or Saka is allowing you 7 attackers who are not so cheap. Like they're all really good, reliable options. The only question I have for you is you're going with double Palace attack. Did you think about having Solanke instead of Mateta at the same price?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like I think it's either Mateta or Solanke up front. I still have a bias towards Mateta only because I think he ended the season so well. He's pretty explosive. Solanke, there's that risk and the unknown of how he's going to fit into the Spurs system. Whether he's going to start immediately, he probably will. But Kulusevski's been playing there in preseason up front. Richarlison's there. Maybe Ange will ease him in second week or third week. And Spurs have tougher fixtures to start with than Palace. So I don't really mind the double Palace attack as long as both Mateta and Eze start. But yeah, it's a close one between Mateta and Solanke. I have been kind of switching between the two. And if I get an indication that one is going to start and the other is not, that's an easy switch to make.
Yeah, and I think once the press conferences happen towards the weekend, you'll have a better idea of whether Mateta. I'm sure they're going to ask him about it.
Yeah.
So how many of these players would you say are locked? Like, what are the main considerations left?
I think Mateta up front, definitely. I think he might move to Solanke. Apart from that, I think Gordon, again, depending on if I get an indication he's going to start, he's going to stay in the team. So really, it's just going to be Mateta. I think it's going to be Mateta or Solanke, but otherwise, I think I'm converging towards a draft that I feel pretty happy with.
Nice. And you're going to captain Haaland? Are you set on that or?
Either Haaland or Jota. I think, but yeah, at the moment, Haaland, because as I said, I think Chelsea at the moment, they are really not, they really don't know what Maresca is expecting of them. Preseason's been a shambles. And I don't think, the state of the defense is going to improve in the last 1 or 2 weeks at Cobham. So Haaland captain it is for now.
Yeah, I actually had a very similar structure yesterday. In terms of defense, at least, I had Gabriel, Guardiola, and Trent. But I think the difference in my team, the one on the left, is that Saka has been a lock in my squad for a while. I think like I've been rating Arsenal very highly and Saka himself. So yeah, what that meant is I had to make too many sacrifices and maybe get one too many budget options in attack. So I decided to split Guardiola's money into Kwanzaa, Konza, and Barco. Like what this lets me do is have the bench that I want, because if I wanted to have Saka and this premium defense, the bench looked like a disaster. I had to get Harwood, Bales, and basically you don't know if some of these players are going to start anyway. So I decided to go against that. So I've included Kwanzaa, hoping that he manages to nail down a spot. If he does, his price could rise rapidly with a 4.5 Liverpool defender. I think in attack, my main considerations, I think Nkunku, Eze, Saka, Haaland, and Isak are locks. The only two positions that I'm left wondering about are Bruno and Joao Pedro. The main thing with Joao Pedro is he's the only striker I like at that price. So it's probably not a good thing, because the only other player I can jump onto is Adam Armstrong, and that's not at all exciting. Whereas in midfield, there are a lot of 5.5 options. You have Smith Rowe, I think that's the one that's top of my list. But you also have Brereton Diaz, and you also have there are a lot of 5.5 options. And Bruno, for me, maybe it's a little of United bias. He signed a new contract. He's going to be at the club for another 3 years. Not like the contracts that Chelsea players sign. I think Palmer signed till 2033 last week. But yeah, I think he's someone who keeps sticking along. He's always involved. He's on pens. He takes set pieces. 8.5 is slightly more than other players like Jota and Gordon. But I think he can prove that he's still valuable. And the other thing I've gone with is a lot of penalty takers in midfield and attack, hoping that pays off. But these two positions could see a change. I'm looking at Solanke, I'm looking at Gordon, I'm looking at Jota. In fact, I had Jota till yesterday, but I decided to pay that extra $1 million and get someone who I'm sure of in terms of minutes. But the news of Brighton making that signing today has put me off Joao Pedro a bit. But like I still have to think about how that changes the structure of my team if I do choose to go without him. I think our bench is pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for the keeper.
Yeah.
It's really the same bench. I think your team really strong in terms of the attack. Like as you said, like all penalty takers. So there are so many routes to points for you, like in that team, especially with your midfield and attack. The area that's a bit worrying is, like you said, there are two players in this team where I'm not sure about X minutes, Kwanzaa and Joao Pedro. It's really uncertain whether both of them are going to start, like not just from an like start of the season perspective. Like are they actually going to hold on a starting spot game week 2, game week 3? Or are you going to be immediately forced into making some changes there? I think that's kind of like the only area of worry that I see there.
Yeah, I think with Kwanzaa, I'm not so worried, like because there are defender options on the bench. Kwanzaa is a good option, the one with the K, and Barco can come in as well. With Joao Pedro, yes, it is a worry because I can't really get rid of him easily either. I'll probably have to wait a couple of weeks and make 2 transfers. There is the option of going with other Brighton players in midfield itself. They also have a lot of 5.5 mids, and then putting the Bruno money into attack with Solanke, which is why I think those 2 spots are the only ones that I'm looking at.
Okay.
And in terms of captaincy, I currently have it on Saka, but I'm like 80% sure I'll end up with Isak as captain. I think Southampton are terrible in defense. Newcastle are really good. Isak has looked excellent. And also, I think they don't have Champions League, so they're going to play just once a week. You're not going to see much rotation. Wilson is out, so I think all signs point to him being really good. The only reason I'm hesitating is I think that premium bias, like where I want to captain someone who's a established, 200 point getter. I'm not going with Haaland because even though he scored a hat trick against Chelsea in preseason, I think it was a very early hat trick with a couple of huge defensive glares, probably loss of concentration, and they did really shut shop in the second half, Chelsea. So I think one good thing about having Haaland instead of Salah is that in game week 2 and 3, when Haaland has really simple fixtures, you can go with him. But when Haaland has tough fixtures, you actually have a lot of other captaincy options.
Makes sense. In the AI, I see that the AI team has Salah in it. Are you at all worried that you don't have Salah? I don't have Salah as well. Do you think that could really, really hurt Game Week 1?
Yeah, I think with the AI team, what I've noticed in the last few years is it doesn't care. Like, it's not a human, so it's not going to be scared of not owning players. It's historically not gone with the most obvious picks according to us, and it's still done fairly well. It actually taught me that not owning one or two players is actually not going to break your season, unless of course like Haaland goes and scores 3 or 4 goals. So I think that I'm not surprised it's gone without Haaland. It did that last season as well. I think the big thing that's different in this team is that it has Havertz. It rates Havertz very highly, and that allows it to keep Salah. And if you look at it, it has Palmer as well. Palmer is probably going to be its biggest differential. Not many people are going to have Palmer because they're going to go with other premiums. But I think the rest of the team kind of looks similar to what we've been looking at. Again, Joao Pedro's X minutes is something to keep an eye on, and that could change its projected points.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I think in defense also, Robinson is someone who is there as a backup to Kwanzaa, similar to like how I have Kwanzaa. I think that should allow it some leeway in defense. And the other thing to note is it doesn't have Trent. So it rates Guardiola higher than Trent. And Trent just doesn't fit into the team because of his price. Like, the solver just doesn't choose him as in the optimal team, even though it rates him very highly.
Yeah, I mean, the AI team looks pretty good, to be fair. I can really see that team outscoring both these teams on the left of it.
Yeah, I think it all depends on Haaland and Salah. I mean, it's a good differential to have. Like, I started making my drafts with trying to fit in both Haaland and Salah, and eventually it dawned on me that I'll be able to have a more balanced team with just one of them. But that human element of Haaland is someone who can just destroy your season in the first 2 weeks is, I think, weighing heavily on a lot of the managers. I think everyone's kind of moving to a Haaland only draft if you look at people on Twitter or YouTube. So the AI team doesn't have that added pressure.
Okay.
Cool.
Hope you all enjoyed this first episode. We're hoping to do more going in the future. If you need, if you're looking for anything different, please feel free to share in the comments as well. And also, if you did enjoy the stream, please feel free. We'll be honored to get a like, and also do subscribe for more.
Thank you.